Okay, we're a week away from the start of the T20 World Cup. In last week's Sky Cricket podcast, we looked at the associate nations, and this week we're going to look at the main challenges. And we've got another Irish guest with us, described as the second best cricket brain to come out of Ireland by Andrew Leonard. How did you take that, by the way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you asked such a patriotic Irishman a question about the Irish captain. He was never going to back down, and I'm glad to be here. You know, Sterlo couldn't make it, so I've
second best.
Yeah, second best. So Sky have managed to get me.
Well, I haven't seen you for a while. How have you been? You've been in IPL, haven't you, for a few weeks?
Yeah, I have. I was out there for the first half of the tournament, and I absolutely loved it. This year of all recent years, I would say there was a more dramatic and evident trend change in the run score and the way people implemented the impact player, and I thought it was wonderful to see. I think the trendsetters and the big change started for Sunrisers Hyderabad. They made some big changes, and they were forced in a way because it came in the name of Travis Head, and he didn't start the tournament, but his impact on the likes of Abhishek Sharma and on the tournament in the way that he played was just wonderful to see. I mean, the ball striking was just on a different planet, and the level of consistency that they achieved that really gave the other teams a shake-up, because every time they played against them, it was a case of, right, how are we going to defeat this side? So I loved watching it.
I hate the sub rule, though. I think it distorts the game. I think the game is designed to be 11 against 11, and part of the beauty of the game is trying to balance your side within the limitations of 11, and I think the sub rule distorts it, but you don't agree, clearly.
No, I don't. I think it. So I'm all for change if it is adding value at some level, even if it was sides getting bowled out for 150 and 160, and that was competitive at the time. I mean, 240, playing 240 is really, really competitive. So I'd imagine we'll see another shift at some stage, even if that is a rule change to try and combat it, whether it might be two impact players, if that's what the bowlers need, or it'll just be a trend change that might come at the up-and-coming World Cup.
I know we're going to look forward and back at the World Cup when you were out there in the Caribbean and won it, but players and teams are going to have to be careful, aren't they? Because they've had impact players, and a lot of those players have been playing in the IPL. There's not in an ICC event, and the pitches are going to be different. So you can't go just with that mindset of we go hard all the time. They're going to have to adapt to the tournament that comes ahead, not the one they've just played in.
Yeah, I totally agree. Not all sides have the ability to do it, or the strength and depth in their batting to do it. But you would say the top teams do. Most of the top teams bat to 9, and the majority of the time you finish a T20 innings 5 or 6 down. And the quality of batter coming in, I think, is now better than it has been in previous generations. Even when I played, it's continuing to improve, even without having an impact player. So for me, it's accessing a part of your brain that is dealing with the level of risk that you are willing to take on, both earlier in your innings and continue then through the whole of the 120 balls. So it's going to be fascinating to see, because in such a big tournament with so many teams, there's danger everywhere. And depending on how sides play, particularly when conditions we're not 100% confident how challenging they're going to be or how good they're going to be to bat, I'd imagine they'd favour the bowling side a bit more. You would imagine that sides that have a little bit less to lose will take on even more risk. They won't be cagey. They will come out all guns blazing.
Can we look back a bit? You know what it's like to win a World T20, because you were there. You were in the middle, actually, when England won it in 2010 in the Caribbean. I mean, it's a long time ago now. It's 14 years ago, and the game has changed dramatically. But what are your memories of that win?
All good ones. We had the time of our life. It was just an incredible time. And I can speak from both sides. At the time, we were sort of an afterthought, really, going into the World Cup. T20 was relatively new, and there'd been 2 previous World Cups, 2007 and 2009, so people were starting to wrestle with what worked and what didn't, and we had no idea. We had absolutely no idea. We were far from favourites, and when you're going into a World Cup like that, there is a sense of unease, because there's a chance of being humiliated, a genuine chance of being humiliated. And I can remember that at the start, particularly in the group stages, because we started really slowly in Guyana against Ireland and the West Indies, and we actually only scraped through on net run rate into our one rain-affected game. But from then, Paul Collingwood and Andy Flower created an atmosphere around the group and a culture around the group that we were just going to give it a red-hot crack. And we did. Our bowlers were the key to us winning. We never had to chase any more than 163 or 165 at any stage, and at that time it's probably equivalent to probably a 180 now.
Yeah. Can you remember the team? I'll put you on the spot here.
I
He
can't
remember yesterday.
We only made one change throughout the World Cup, and that change was Bo Para for Peterson in a bit of a dead rubber game. It might have been against New Zealand, but the team
KP went back for a birth of his child.
He did, yeah. Dylan was born at the time, yeah. So the team was Lum, Keyswetter, Peterson, Collingwood, Morgan.
How's Collingwood batting ahead of the game has changed.
Collingwood, Morgan, Wright, Yardy, Swan, Sidebottom, Bresnan, Broad.
Very good.
Can I ask you one question about that tournament? And it was a tactic you used that ended up being critical. It threw everyone, the slower ball bouncer, or as Bumble used to call it, the long hob. But it was like almost like all the batters on the opposition literally did not know what to do with that delivery. Was that a pre-planned thing? Did it just happen on the hoof out there? You suddenly bowled one and thought this is really working. How did that come about?
Collie had come back from the IPL, hadn't he? And I think had learnt one or two things there.
Yeah, he had, and I think that combined. I mean, we sit in meetings now, and apparently it evolved in the meeting where you see it and you watch the equivalent of an Excel spreadsheet on the red zone where not to bowl and the green zone where to bowl, and then there's this blank area where nobody had really bowled or explored. And it was almost like it was a ball that it was so bad you couldn't hit. It was one of those, and it turned out to be a revelation. It not only was so bad you couldn't hit it, but it got wickets as well, and sides were
our leg spin could have been me and you.
So it sort of evolved. The guys were brilliant. I mean, on top of that, you've got guys at the emerging in their career, and guys very experienced. So Ryan Sidebottom, very, very experienced, right on top of his game. Brody was bowling quick at the time and had great skill. Same with Tim Bresnan. I think the one thing that stood out for me in that bowling lineup, yes, Graham Swan is just a brilliant operator and was for so long. But Michael Yardy stood out head and shoulders up and with some of the best bowlers in the world, and how he went about his business on those types of wickets. And
I suppose what that team shows you is the early stages of a complete divergence between long form and short form, because you kind of plump for Lum and Keyswetter at the top of the order, which was a very almost late decision, and they would have been nowhere near the Test team, for example. And as you say, somebody like Michael Yardy, obviously Paul Collingwood, split captains. So it was the early sign of the game really diverging.
Yeah. Jimmy Anderson was sitting on the sideline the whole time. He had a great trip. Talk about touring the Caribbean as a player, as we all know, is great. I mean, we're not complaining as commentators. It's going to be a great trip for that as well. But no, I think you're right. And it was almost stumbled upon. We played an England Lions team on the way through to a Bangladesh tour, played Pakistan as well. And Keyswetter and Lum absolutely smashed us everywhere. And I think Andy sat back and said it was a risk worth taking at the time. If you go back to the 2009 World Cup, the opening partnership, I think it was Wright and Bo Para, and that hadn't quite worked as well as they'd hoped. So again, a risk and a gamble that came off.
You mentioned that you weren't favourites. In fact, you were quite significant underdogs, but that's a theme of the tournament, isn't it? There's a very strong correlation in the 50 over World Cup between favourites going into it winning, form.
Yeah, ranked number one.
Yeah, exactly. The T20 is completely opposite. It's a bit of a lottery. Is it fair to describe it as a lottery or not?
I think that's unfair. The quality of the players still have to exist. I mean, if it was a lottery, we'd be sitting around here talking about how Oman might have a chance of qualifying with or winning with Ireland and Namibia. It's not the case. You still work on levels of probability, but I think it is a little bit like a shootout or a boxing match, where on any given day, if you have power with the bat and variation with the ball, opposition sides can turn you over regardless of who you are. And I think in our fastest, most entertaining format, that is a great attribute to have in a World Cup, because it gives you the exposure that the platform created at a world competition should have. There should be a chance of an upset in every other game, because 50 over tournament's gone to a 10 team. T20 used to be 16. A lot of sides have got test status. Everybody has got IT20 status now. So there's your opportunity. Go out and show the world what you can do.
But history tells you that it is a bit more of a lottery, simply because 50 overs has a longer history to it. So when we were growing up, the West Indies were, the main team to beat. When we were watching right the way back to the 70s and 80s, they were the side to beat. And more recently, it's obviously been Australia in the 50 over World Cup has dominated. If you look at this competition, it's been West Indies twice, England twice, India won the first one, which had a huge impact on the world game. Pakistan once, Sri Lanka once, Australia once. So it has been spread around more. Looking into the tournament now, we're a week away. Who are best positioned, do you think, going into those conditions in the Caribbean and America?
Yeah, for me, the strongest side, even with injuries throughout the tournament, is India, without doubt. Their strength and depth is absolutely incredible at the moment, and it's almost probably worth talking about who the players were that missed out in their squad of 15 because of the quality that they possess as well. And they haven't won it since that first World Cup back in 2007. That's a long.
It's also an irony, because everybody talks about the IPL and how that has improved India's T20 cricket. The irony is the only time they've won it was pre-IPL. They haven't won it since.
Huge impact. Yeah.
But again, like the things probably worth talking about. They're favourites for me. I think they're just the quality that they have on paper. If they produce it, I think they can beat anybody quite well in the tournament.
What did you think of their selection? I mean, you'd have been out there a little bit when it was the debate. It's almost like that position where at the end of the 50 over World Cup for England, should they move on from senior players? Because you've seen the talent. It's almost like India are favourites because of the people they've left behind. Yeah. Some of the names they've left behind, like Shubman Gill or whatever.
Yeah.
So, what did you think about how they've gone with sticking with their senior players? You were there in Adelaide when they were plodding along in that power play and England beaten by 10 wickets in the semi-final. Yeah. Do you think they've moved on from that as a mindset?
I hope they have, because Rohit Sharma and Rahul Dravid have been outspoken about it. Who rewound the clock here 2 years ago when they turned in a bilateral series. Talked about how they wanted to take the game on and bring more of an aggression to each and every game. We saw that in the 50 over World Cup recently. It went missing in the final, having lost the toss and chosen to bat, but I think they were going to bat anyway. So they're doing exactly what they want to do in principle, but the execution isn't quite there. So it's a huge competition for them. I probably would have. I mean, I'm delighted Yuzvendra Chahal is within their squad. People in the public and in the media were unsure about his selection. For me, he is an incredible bowler. He's one of the best wrist spinners in the world here and now, and Kuldeep's form as well comes into it. The only decision I probably would have had differently, and if I was selecting the squad, I would have had Shubman Gill over Yashasvi Jaiswal. Again, a big call.
That's a big call.
It is a big call, but I played alongside Shubman Gill. I know how he thinks, I know how he works. And for me, he is a future leader within that side. And I think in big moments in World Cups, you need the more leaders, the better. Even if he's just sitting on the sideline, you still need inspiration from here, there, and everywhere. You need that sense of positivity.
There's our Twitter link there. Yes. Morgan doesn't rate Jaiswal.
And I'm going to another Twitter link. Give the pod an exclusive now. Have you been approached to coach India?
No, absolutely. No, I haven't. No.
I thought we might get a world exclusive on that. Everybody else has been approached.
Oh, apparently, yeah. No. Very happy at the although Sterling might have been approached.
They do need a better cricket brain.
They do need a really good cricket brain. Maybe Lenny's got an insight.
Final question about India. Almost where you started there by saying they're favourites. We seem to approach every World Cup recently in the last 5 years by saying India are favourites, but they haven't done it.
Yeah.
Can they do it this time?
I think they can. I think they can, because they've got to a stage now where Adelaide will hurt, but more recently the World Cup at home, losing against Australia in front of 125,000 Indian fans. I think we were there. There was probably one Australian fan in the crowd. I mean, it's ridiculous. That support will continue. But you look, we will talk more about conditions, but their spinners will come into the game a hell of a lot more, and their level of batsmanship will come into the game if the wickets slow down like we think. But also that excellence in power hitting is probably a point of difference for me. So somebody like Shivam Dubey has to play. I mean, he's an incredible player within his own right, but I think he will set this World Cup alight.
You mentioned the conditions there. Maybe before we turn our attention to England, just a bit of chat there, because with India, they're in America, and there's great uncertainty there. You're doing a few games. I think you're just going for a jolly, aren't you?
Yeah, I am.
You're not going to commentate, you're just going for a few Guinnesses.
Pretty much. Well, we're going to watch
Apple.
the greatest mind in cricket open the baton against India. We're great mates with Sterlo, and there's a group of us going across to cheer him on for a couple of days, so no doubt we'll have a good time.
But in the Caribbean particularly, some of those grounds have got very small, what we call squares, they call them blocks in Australia, which suggests that as you go through the tournament, actually the pitches might slow up a little bit. I mean, when England were there in the Caribbean before Christmas and they had that series, Rob Key talked about it being a slugfest, and that's really how England seemed to be approaching this, that it's going to be high scoring, and they've gone for power hitters. But as you get through it on some of these smaller squares, that might just change a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the point of my original question about the IPL and 270, 280. And generally, I think in English cricket, but, if in doubt, it's go harder. I'd like also, and he might wince at this, I'd also might like a bit of go smarter as well. There will be conditions, there'll be different conditions, there'll be different grounds, different countries, America compared to Antigua, Barbados, etc. So, and then as you say, they may well slow down. Already India are talking about possibly playing 4 spinners. And also the start times, you're not going to have too much dew at 10:30, it's going to be hot. The pitches will
might be
grip.
morning dew.
Yeah, maybe morning dew. Yeah,
exactly.
They may be a bit seedy heads as well, to be honest, by the sounds of it. So, it will be interesting. So I think it will grip. I think spin will have a major role. I asked Benedict, I think the par score in the Caribbean recently in international cricket, it's about 152, but you will have the odd game that is a 220 that will just go everywhere, you just smash it. But also there'll be some that towards the end may grip, and that's where, a little bit like the IPL, like we've just seen, Hyderabad at home, 270, 280, they went to Chennai, wasn't it, last night, and got a par score, and above par score, and said, thank you very much, we'll play the extra spinner, we'll defend that in Chennai. So it is about being smart, which I know you want to come on to England. I don't think England were that smart. Some of the off-field decisions leading into the 50-over World Cup and during the 50-over World Cup, they weren't quite smart enough.
Well, let's turn our attentions to England then, because it's a really important tournament this for the leadership. Matthew Mott and Josh Butler, both of whom I think were stung by how England performed in the 50-over World Cup, the criticism that accompanied it. First of all, can they, if it goes badly, can they afford it to go badly? Would it be the end of that leadership group if it goes badly?
It would be very, very close to, and that's. I don't think that's being harsh. Even when I was captain and Trevor Bayliss was coach, the level of expectation on your shoulders, given the quality of player, both in the domestic game and in the changing room at your disposal, leads to that expectation. We are one of the best countries in the world when it comes to resource, facility, and we do continue to produce brilliant players, and I don't think this squad is any different. Don't think the squad was any different in India at the 50-over World Cup. So ultimately your job is to get the best out of that team for the tournament, and if they don't, I think they have a brilliant squad and they've selected well.
Is there anybody who's unlucky to miss out?
For me, no, I don't think so. I like the level of consistency that they've showed, both and the continuity between pre-Christmas in the West Indies with the batting lineup that they went with and the selection that they've made for this World Cup. There was clear thought and process that went into it, which sounds simple, but during the World Cup, actually, I'm not sure that was there, both pre and in the World Cup. I think Nas is alluding to the same thing in his comments earlier, but I think they've selected well. A little bit like I've mentioned before, back in 2010, I think conditions play a huge part in how bowlers adapt to it, because there are two things. You talk about the block or the pitches that they will play on. It's so important for bowlers to get it right, because the boundaries are small in the West Indies, and if you don't get it right, regardless of the surface, you will go the distance. So for me, the bowling lineup has to be in rhythm, with clarity, and bowling well. So for me, that's Adil Rashid or Liam Livingston and Moeen Ali and Will Jacks, knowing their role and how they're going to go about their business in each and every group stage game, and getting your combination with what seam attack you're going to go with. And I think over the course of this series against Pakistan, the 3 games, the major factor will be Jofra Archer.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Nas, about that, because we're recording this before the first game. The first one was washed out in Leeds, but this one here at Edgbaston. And there's a huge amount on Jofra Archer for a guy who's not played for 14 months in international cricket, who's had a recent history of serious injuries. And yet England, saying he's our main man, really. That's quite a lot of expectation.
You can see why. Like he did. Well, it was a completely different scenario. Obviously, it wasn't a fitness thing. It was, David Willey. It was a side that you'd been brought up with and you knew, and you're growing, and then suddenly, no, we're going to move on. So that is a risk. It was a different risk back then. It is a risk, but it's difficult with Jofra because he's had so many injuries in the last however many years that you don't really know what type of cricketer. Is he a rhythm cricketer? So does he need to play more and more so that when you get to that first game, so does he need to play all 3 of these games now? With the first one being called off, there'll be some, like Andrew Caddick from our era, would need to play all 3. You could not have him having a week off before the Scotland game because he'd be all over the place. Whereas Goffey would turn up, rock up, thank you very much. But because Jofra hasn't been around for a long time, you may know the answers. Is he a rhythm bowler, or can you just give him a few days off because his body's struggling? And in between games, would you have to rest him and look after him and pick and choose which games he plays in, but still be comfortable that when he rocks up against Australia for the next game for England, he'll be absolutely fine?
Yeah, for me, the answer lies within that first year of international cricket that I played. Probably a year and a half, actually. Played an absolute unbelievable amount of all formatted cricket. And you would say that that's an area in which he wasn't managed as well as he could have been, particularly in test match cricket. He bowled long spells, played back-to-back games. And you have to realise that the step up in international cricket, albeit he is more than capable and has proved it over periods of time, but it still takes a lot out of you physically. You talk to the fast bowlers that we've produced, like Mark Wood, and how he's been managed over the years, a younger James Anderson and Stuart Broad. You can't simply just play every game and be expected to bowl 90 miles an hour. So I would imagine that they have learnt a lot from that period leading into his 3 injuries on the bounce, which led to him being out for 2 years, and they will use that moving forward from here. So I'd imagine we will see him in a couple of these games in order to get him game fit, and then they will pick and choose how they want to use him throughout the course of that World Cup.
Can I just ask you about moving on to England's batting? 2 questions. What do you think about the lineup, as in lacking a left-hander with Stokes being absent? Would you definitely just move one out of like Sam Curran or Moeen Ali up just to provide a left-hand option? And also those top 4 all would preferably like to bat as openers, possibly in the top 3, Salt, Butler, Jacks, Bairstow. And you've got Brook there waiting, who looks to me to be the next big thing, if not already there. So Bairstow at 4, Brook at 4, how do you see that, or a left-hander?
Yeah, I'd say in extreme circumstances. So playing at Antigua, where the wind is howling from, say, right to left, and there's a clear disadvantage if you don't have right-left hand combination. I'd imagine in England's strongest 11 there will be either both Ali and Sam Curran or one of. So utilising them when you see fit, yes, can be a positive.
But you don't see Duckett getting into the first choice side?
I don't. I think he's a brilliant player. I can't fit him in I think they'll stick with Butler, Salt, Jacks, Bairstow at 4. I don't think it's as big a challenge for Johnny Bairstow because he has fulfilled that role over the years, and when he is in good form, which is just turned around a really tough winter for himself, he plays spin brilliantly, and his power game against spin, more so than manipulating the ball around, is probably his strongest point. So again, adding Harry Brook in there, and then you're into the all-rounders of Livingston, Curran, Ali, what balance they go with. I think Livingston just has to play in my eyes, but I can't fit Ben Duckett in.
Should we turn to Australia? Should they have picked Jake Fraser-McGurk?
No.
They've. I mean, it's a classic Australian selection. They're a big tournament team. They do well in. You've seen them win the 50 over World Cup. They have gone with the proven and the tried and the tested, and everybody's clamouring for this young kid to play. You wouldn't have picked him.
I wouldn't. I really like him. I've not pre-IPL. I'd watched his 150 off 30 balls at the Karen Rolton Oval in Adelaide, and thought, geez, he looks a little bit like AB, but let's see how he goes. And
That's AB de Villiers, not Alan Border. Great player though Alan Border was.
Don't try and drag it back now.
Yeah. But I thought he is an unbelievable sense of presence at the crease for such a young man. Plays a lot of difficult shots almost from ball one. So the quality of the player is certainly there, and you just can't ask an Australian about another Australian because they don't have a bad word to say about them. It's like he is AB, the Australian AB. But for me, there's a reason they go tried and tested, because they know it works if they create a reasonable environment. If they can get to the latter stages of the tournament, you want your best players there in the big moments of the game making simple decisions, like they have proved time and time again. And they've never really, from the outside, it's looked like they've never really gone to chase a player off. They've never really gone to chase a win in any stage. Even you go back through the years, pre 2003 World Cup, where Punter was, I think, captain very early on in his captaincy, but Warney tested positive. I think Gillespie went down, and somebody else went, and they just went for, all right, who's next cab off the rank? Andrew. Yes, great players, but in international cricket they weren't necessarily proven, and they made it work because they believed that there was a really good carousel of people coming through, and the quality of the player that they identified and the role made the transition easier.
Lots of all-rounders in their squad. We've talked about the importance of spin in the Caribbean. I mean, they've got Zampa as their main spinner. Maxwell, who's endured a bad IPL, can bowl off spin. Is that an area of potential weakness for them?
I don't think you can ever look into Glenn Maxwell's recent form and sort of overthink it, because he definitely doesn't. So there's no point in us doing it. I probably see the balance of the side. The conundrum that they will go through is whether Stoinis, Green, Agar fulfill the role of 5, 6, 7 over. Well, Mitchell Marsh has to play. He's captain, but he's probably not going to bowl as much as somebody like Stoinis. So that might potentially present, an imbalance in the side. Whether they feel like Maxwell won't contribute as much with the ball or bowl in the power play. So your Stark, Hazelwood, Cummins, Zampa. Who's the other overs going to come from? Is it Maxwell? If it's not, can sides target it, or do they have to find overs from someone else? But again, they are a very, very strong team. All of their players have done well at the IPL.
Incredible how they just win tournaments.
They do,
isn't it?
and incredible how they may underperform slightly in franchise tournaments. But once they it's not a baggy green in white ball cricket, but once they get any kind of Aussie shirt on, because they just go through the roof. And when they get to pressure situations, I mean, you could not have more pressure situation than Ahmedabad with that crowd and everyone expecting India to win, and the way they handle it and the way Cummins handle it. And that's another thing. Marsh is captain there. And he's coming in with a injury cloud. So that's an area with your captain. You don't want to be like last minute changes and things like that. So they will want Mark. And he's a fabulous white ball cricketer, as we've seen, and a 2020 cricketer, as we saw in the World Cup in the UAE. So I just want to talk South Africa.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a serious batting lineup. They've got some good spin options. Kahiso Rabada with a new ball, etc. Some more than decent all-rounders. Are they a threat?
I lose my dough, by the way, every...
You and Dooley. You and Simon Dooley did it before.
I mean, eventually I'm going to be right. In 20 years' time, they're bound to win it once. But I do my dough every year on South Africa. Because they always look, like you say,
absolutely. You look at that
a likely side. I mean, Heinrich Klaassen, you'd probably a batsman. You wouldn't pick anybody ahead of him at the moment in the middle order. And yet, if you were in charge of South Africa, would you reflect on the past and all the missed opportunities and all the hurdles that they've failed to overcome, or would you park that and just think about the future, or do you have to touch on the past to learn from the past and learn from your mistakes?
Well, I don't think it's ironic that we're at Edgbaston, by the way.
Absolutely.
Back in '99, we all remember that moment. They should have won that World Cup. That's probably their biggest opportunity to win a world event. You would say that the side they had was incredible, but their current team is on paper is as good as any of the sides at the World Cup. Probably not as good as India, but the rest absolutely. If you're in charge of the team, I would imagine that given defeat, they beat India at Perth and looked one of the strongest sides in that last World Cup in 2022, and then got beaten by the Netherlands at the Adelaide Oval. So the conundrum the balance for me would be how many of the players are actually acknowledging it or ignoring it. So on an individual basis, you would process things differently and then lead it back to a forward-facing objective of this is a new opportunity, not the age-old case of, here we go again. But I don't give them a chance.
You don't give them a chance?
Absolutely. And I said it before.
Clip that up when they win it.
I hope they go on and win it. But for me, I just don't see it.
You were there in that semi-final in Kolkata in the 50 over.
Absolutely.
Did that feel like a history repeating itself?
Well, it did at the start, and then of course they actually played pretty well in the middle of the innings and gave themselves.
Did it feel like a mental thing or just one of those days? Was it a here we go again moment or not?
I think only those in the dressing room would know that.
Right.
From the outside, hard to say. But, I mean, if you look at the group they're in, the Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, Netherlands, you'd hope they'd get through that group, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. I'd just read their team out. Their strongest 11 is ridiculous. The names on the team sheet.
Hendricks, Markram, Klaassen,
Miller,
Stubbs, Janssen, Maharaj, Rabada, Coetzee, Norkia.
Shamsi.
Shamsi, might not get in the first 11.
I would have picked maybe Ngidi. I know he's going as a travelling sub, but on those pitches, we're talking about slower balls and cutters and all those things he bowls as the tournament progresses. I'd have liked him in that squad, but they haven't got him.
We should touch on the home nation, actually, West Indies, who are, I think, priced up at 10-1 and seem quite a good bet, because that would be one of the more outside teams, I suppose, but knowledge of home conditions, extremely powerful batting lineup, high pace as well. Well, what do we think about the West Indies?
Better value bet than South Africa for me. I would love them to do well and go on and just it's such a beautiful place to play cricket. Added on that the home nation's success always adds a huge amount to any tournament, regardless of where you are. But they are more than capable. They have a lot of power hitters. They have spin options. Probably the area of concern for me is if they are going to go on is how their bowlers bowl at the death. They have Alzari Joseph. They have all-rounders in Romario Shepherd and Andre Russell as well. So how they execute, I think, will determine how they will, because their power game is there. They know how to bat in the West Indies. But I would say what lets them down on occasion is their bowling. But they will be confident. Having turned over England at home pre-Christmas, home World Cup, knowing conditions inside out.
Shemron hit I can't miss his flight, for example, which happened last time. So he missed Australia, didn't he? At least he'll be at home. And the new boy, Shamar Joseph, who made a brief appearance in the IPL. I saw he got a wicket in a warm-up game against South Africa the other day. There's a huge buzz around.
There is. They weren't there in that 50-over World Cup. There's a reason there. Or you look at the franchise, you look at the 100 selections recently. West Indian. Look at the IPL. West Indian. They just they are made. They've won it twice, as I said earlier. They are made for this format, and more importantly, you should be unbiased as a commentator, but to Barbados with West Indies there in a final would just be a great story, and I think they've got a chance as long as Morg says, they get their bowling right. They got the power hitters, definitely.
Yeah, and they can find a way. Darren Sammy, who's in charge of their side, I mean, he was the captain when they won it twice. Absolutely serial winner. I'd imagine he would have a lot to contribute over the course of the competition as well.
A couple of sides, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. Sri Lanka, I forgot to mention, they've won it once, and they look like they're on a slight upward curve. They had a terrible 50 over World Cup. They have to now qualify for Champions Trophy in that format. But the shorter the format, they may not have some power. And Bangladesh have just lost to America twice, haven't they, Bangladesh? So
playing again today, I think, actually, third of the game. But they're 2-0 down.
Looking forward to the Angelo Matthews, Shakib Al Hassan rematch. I'm just looking there. They're in the same group, are they? Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. I think they're in the same group. So
there's a bit of there's history in both directions, wasn't there? Recently, it worked the other way round as well. There's definitely something going on there.
New Zealand, when you look at that team, it's just the same team. Year in, year out, tournament in, tournament out. It's exactly the same team. At what point, does that injection of fresh blood have to come? I mean, I know Rachin Ravindra is someone.
It's basically him for Guptill, who played for a decade. Rachin's come in and fill that.
And they'll be there. They have been there or thereabouts with this team for many, many years. Do you still see that to be the case?
Yeah, I do. And simply, I don't see anybody from the outside coming in and replacing some of the quality of the players that they produce. And the Kiwis will turn up, and they always talk about punching above their weight. But for me, that's not good enough at this level of tournament. With the side that they have, they should minimally, at least looking to get to the semi-final with the quality that they have. Yes, I completely understand the situation with resources, but there are a lot of sides around the world that would chop their arm off for some of the batters that they have and some of the bowlers that they have as well. I mean, Trent Boult comes back into a side that he's one of the best in the business up front with the new ball. The spin department is covered with Ish Sodhi and Mitchell Santner.
Who's got a fantastic record in the Caribbean.
Yeah, they're just a well-drilled operation, and it would shock me if they didn't have aspirations to go on and win.
Any concerns over Kane Williamson, or does class end?
I was just going to ask you that. Your original first question asked, you said go hard still. Most sides have 8-9. Some sides have moved away from that glue. England have moved away from Joe Root, who was really good in India in the World T20 out there. Australia have moved on from Steve Smith. Kohli and Barber are the glue that bat through all the way and finish it at the end. What about Williamson? In these conditions, do you think there's a role for him? Definitely.
Absolutely. I think he's one of those players that is put in a category of player that only strikes it at 120, 130. But actually, I've played alongside him and watched him at the IPL over the years in various different conditions. If conditions are good, he can up his rate. And the world-class player that he is, choosing that time and when to do it is normally right on point. And the added value for me is the captain that he is. Under pressure, he makes good decisions, and I think you will need that in abundance if you're going to go on and win the World Cup. So for me, he comes straight back in. I think he was injured in the recent series against Pakistan and didn't play, but he comes straight back in and leads from the front.
I was looking at where Afghanistan are playing their games, Guyana and Trinidad, which may play to their strengths, which would be the obvious spin trio, and that might be a good place for them to threaten.
A nightmare to play against Afghanistan in dry Guyana conditions, because you worry, going into playing against them, you worry about their spinners and the effect that they might have. And for me, just looking at Afghanistan as a whole, they have the X factor to turn over any side, to go on to latter stages, and that for me isn't the area that's let them down at major competitions. It's actually been some of the basics of the game, and you go back to the Wankhede where Maxwell got his double 100 very early in his innings. He was dropped at 45. Mujib, it went straight through his hands. Absolutely, you catch Maxwell there, the game is dead and buried, and Afghanistan then progress, and that's just a different outlook, it's a different commitment. It's an attitude thing. So it's something that there is well within their controllables. That I believe if they can bring that to the party along with the X factor, that they're a big threat to a lot of sides.
Yeah, I don't. The general point with Afghanistan now is that it's not an upset. If as England found out, where was that, Delhi or whatever in the 50 over, we keep comparing formats, but in fact more 2020 I see them even more as a threat, because they've got some gun batters at the top of the order who absolutely give it a smash as well, so, and technically are very good, technical hitting I'm talking about, not blocking it. So I don't see that as an upset. If Afghanistan beat anyone, they are going in under Trotty to try and just win every game. That's how they see how they've progressed as a nation.
The 4 groups: Pakistan, India, USA, Canada, Ireland, 2 go through.
Sorry, read them.
Pakistan, India, USA, Canada, Ireland. Are you going for
the
we haven't touched on Pakistan, actually. We've not talked about Pakistan.
I've just got something to add, and it relates to Pakistan, actually. So Ireland are going okay at the moment, contrary to belief on previous guests on the podcast. They're going okay, and it's still all about it could have been, it should have been type moment. This is a huge opportunity. They play against Canada, India first, which probably might not go their way, but Canada and the USA, that are tough challenges. USA have turned them over previously, but if they win those 2 games and play Pakistan last, they will build confidence and belief, depending on how Pakistan are travelling, because ultimately whoever wins that game will, if Ireland have won, will go through. So that just creates a bit of a threat for Pakistan. But
I mean, we'll get a good look at Pakistan over the next 3 games, and they've got like Harris Routh, who's in a similar position to Jofra Archer. He's not had the extent of the injuries, but coming back and giving them that great pace. Shane, obviously, Nassim Shah, they've got an exceptional pace attack. And the point you made about England, about the first 4 probably wanting to bat in the top 2, that could be said about Pakistan's first 4 as well.
I think incredibly, and I find myself odd saying this thing, is where Pakistan have struggled in white ball cricket is with their spin options. We grew up, facing Saki and Mushtaq Ahmed and Abdul Qadir and all that, but nowadays Imad's back. I think that's a good selection, and they've got Abrar Ahmed, who, with his variation, it'd been his first world event. Sometimes it takes a couple of events for people to work you out. You can imagine people like, even today, there's a couple that have played against him on that Pakistan tour with Jacks and people like that. So that sort of mystery about him. So they've added to their spin. But if you go into, I see some Pakistan fans in the distance now coming into Edgbaston, this place is a sellout. If you ask them, are your side still open to the odd upset? They'll be watching. They won't be thinking, we're definitely beating America and we're definitely beating Ireland. History tells you that Pakistan can be brilliant one day and absolutely rubbish the next.
The second group: Australia, England, Namibia, Oman, Scotland. Would we expect the obvious to go through there?
I would not underestimating Scotland at all, but
sure.
I would. Yeah.
West Indies, New Zealand, Afghanistan, Papua New Guinea, and Canada, the third group.
Well, that's West Indies, New Zealand, Afghanistan. Like I said earlier, Afghanistan will think they should qualify.
So not a given which 2 go through to the Super 8s there.
Tough group,
real tough group.
And South Africa, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, who, according to Andrew Leonard, they're going to win it this year. He came with some nicknames, by the way, for you.
No, it's gone viral.
But I got a nickname as well, and it's translated as grandpa commentator. So I surely don't look as old as you do.
Better than bald uncle or whatever I am or whatever. Have you been listening to our award-winning podcast or not?
Of course. Since I've come back, I've been in the car, bored out of my chair. Actually, I had to turn it off. I was going to fall asleep behind the wheel. I had to turn it off.
We better try and pick a winner each. Who are you going for?
I will go Australia. They'll get the 3, 50-20.
You've already said India.
Yeah, I think India. I would love England to win it and love the West Indies to go as far as they can.
You?
I'm doing my dough on South Africa, as I always do, and he says they've not got a price.
Well, so. your bookie is listening. He's just booked his next holiday. We're a week away. It's going to be great fun. We'll see you there.